so we'll go ahead and go into reports and recommendations. And the first item on that is the reopening plan update. Is that going to be Deputy Superintendent Roberts?
It is, President Wagers. Thank you, President Wagers, trustees. So let me back up a little bit and just do a little reminder to folks that on November 16th, the decision was made to move to remote-only learning from November 30th through Friday, January 15th. And we chose to do that because we were having some major operational issues with substitutes, the amount of folks in quarantine, and then, of course, with that many people in quarantine, we felt like learning was being disrupted as well. At that time, when we made that decision, we also had proposed that we would return to hybrid learning plan, the every other day plan we've had, beginning on January 19th. And so that's what we're here to talk to you about tonight, is to update you on that and what our plan is. And we, of course, all of these decisions are difficult decisions to make. We've had emails from parents and staff who'd like to stay remote. We've had emails from parents and staff who want us to return to hybrid. And then we've had a growing number of emails from families who'd like to see us actually come back to a 5-day in-person, 5-day-a-week in-person learning plan. And while we know we're not ready to do that right now, we would like to look at returning to our hybrid schedule. So currently this week, all students have come back and they're learning remotely from the starting today. Gosh, it seems like it's Tuesday already and it's only Monday through Friday. Then all students will resume in the hybrid learning schedule starting Tuesday, January 19th. Staff have had the flexibility to teach remotely since November 30th, but they will be asked to return to working from school once we resume with the hybrid learning schedule. And then extracurricular activities may also resume if safety protocols can be followed. So if they can, ensure that there'll be masking and distancing and limited to numbers, certain numbers and groups, extracurricular activities can also resume. So currently in Ada County, the average case rate for Ada County is 51.35, which is still high. The last week we were in hybrid learning, the average case was 59.54. In reaching out, however, to our, and that was the week of November 16th, that 59.54. So in reaching out to our medical professionals we work with, as of Friday, January 8th, both Dr. Nasser and Dr. Bramwell indicated that they would support a return to in-person learning in our hybrid schedule on the 19th. They said that the state of the hospitals was better than had been anticipated. So that was really nice news to hear. As a matter of fact, in an update that I received from St. Luke's that Chris Roth does, the president and CEO of St. Luke's, to the boards and committees, he said that capacity for care across the system has improved overall. So that's a really, really great news to hear, that our hospitals aren't as in dire circumstances as they were thinking they might be at this point if the cases continue to climb and the hospitalizations continue to climb. Then Central District Health also supports our return to in-person learning in our hybrid schedule following the safety protocols we've been using and will continue to use. There's been some concern that we were thinking of going to shorten our distancing protocols from 6 feet to 3 feet, but that has not been considered and has not been a topic of discussion for us. If down the road, once we have vaccinations, if the case rates, drop dramatically, we might be able to look at shortening that distancing, but as of right now, we have no plans to do that. So before we get into the data that Nick Smith will present, I wanted to pause quickly and see if there's any questions.
President Gregory.
Yep.
Or President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
You caught me. Deputy Superintendent Roberts. I think it might be interesting just to kind of let everyone know how frequently we're touching base with the data points in the community, the calls, the committee meetings, et cetera, and so forth, just to kind of, this is not just, okay, we better look at this. This is a steady effort, if you could comment.
President Wagers, Trustee Gregory, absolutely. So every week I have, and Tamara Frederickson, we do 2 different calls with Central District Health, one on Mondays, one on Fridays. And then I also listen in to a call and participate with Ada County twice a week. And that is with the elected officials in Ada County. It's with St. Luke's, St. Alphonsus, the Veterans Hospital, Central District Health, and other school districts in Ada County. And then on Friday mornings, we touch base with Dr. Nasser and Dr. Bramwell each week. Sometimes there's other meetings, interspersed in there. Over the holiday break, we did not meet as often, each week, but we made sure that last week on the 8th that we had a chance to touch base with Ada County, CDH, Dr. Nasser, and Dr. Bramwell. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
And then also as part of that, we have a reopening committee that has myself, Trustee Gregory, Trustee Esty, and the superintendent and deputy superintendent, who then refer the information back to us so we can help make decisions on the plan, or not make decisions on the plan, but I'll talk about the plan and adjust those as necessary to bring to the board for decision making.
Thank you. Okay, well, we're going to move on to Nick Smith then for some of the data, and then but at any time, of course, we'll answer questions, but we'll let him take that section right now.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Roberts, President Wagers and trustees. The data I'm going to share with you today is really an update of the slides that I've shared with you in the past, so I'll walk you through those. This first slide is current data for positive COVID-19 cases. You can see that when we made the decision to move to online instruction back in November, we were at a peak, and we have since then been moving in the right direction. As you can see, the cases have declined quite substantially. Of course, in that time frame, you did have Thanksgiving vacation. You also had the winter holiday break. And so obviously those contributed to it as well as our move to online instruction. But we have seen a decrease. The cases are moving in the direction we would want to see them moving. Next slide.
Nick, this is President Wagers. So one question on that, the last slide, is how do we know that we're getting is accurate representation of what's actually happening? Because I mean, do teachers, are we asking them to self-report? Are we polling them? What about students and families? How do we know we're getting those cases reported?
President Wagers and members of the board, so the data that we report is only that data that is reported to us. We do ask that the data, that staff report that data to us, but we are not reporting cases if they are not affiliated with a school activity. So cases that occurred over the winter holiday break that did not impact school, did not come from school, would not be reflected in this data. The numbers you're seeing for the time period that we were on break are either cases that took place in an athletic program, which I'm going to get to that in just a moment, or they were cases that were reported to us just today because a teacher wasn't able to return to work because they are on quarantine right now. And so absolutely, there may be cases that took place, but these are only the cases that we were made aware of and or that were reported because they were affiliated with a school activity or program or school being in session. We do get notified of cases that we may not have otherwise been notified through the contact tracing process with Central District Health. But other than that, it is possible that we do miss some cases if they don't report them to us.
Thank you.
The next slide is the number of positive cases, secondary versus elementary. Again, this is a reflection of the same data set, but just broken up by elementary and secondary. Nothing unique there. Next slide. This is the percent positivity rate, secondary versus elementary. You can see the positivity rates, again, going down, which is positive. Next slide. This is the number of probable cases by reporting period. You can see that we've had no probable cases reported during this current reporting period. We had one probable case reported during the last reporting period, December 15th through January 4th. So we've definitely seen a decrease in this. There's a number of reasons potentially for this, is that more people are actually getting tested rather than those being presumed positives. But also just the overall decline in the total number of cases. Next slide. These are the cases that were reported during the winter athletics that took place. So on December 22nd, we re-engaged with athletics, as you know, and we started collecting cases that were affiliated with an individual who was involved with athletics. It does not necessarily mean that the case originated within the athletic program, but if an individual who was engaging in our athletics program tested positive or was probable, we reported that data here. And as you can see, December 22nd through January 4th, which was a 14-day period, we had 7 cases within all of our high school athletic programs during that time period. January 5th through today, as late as just recently, we've had 4 cases, and you can see the percentage of those of the whole. So we have 577 students and staff members that are involved with our athletic programs. So staff members being the coaches that are affiliated with those sports. And so you can see the number of positive cases that are affiliated with the athletic department really are quite low, 1.25% from December 22nd through January 4th and 0.72% from January 5th through the current. And so we really do feel like our coaches and our athletic directors and our principals are taking their responsibility very serious and doing a really good job of following the guidelines that the district put together in collaboration with them to ensure that we weren't spreading COVID during athletic activities. They really are sticking to them and doing a good job. Next slide. This is the quarantine data that I've shared with you in the past. You can see that I have not provided any updated data since the last time you saw this slide, but I have added 2 more columns that we will be populating and reporting to you at later dates. What we have decided to do is collect the quarantine data snapshots in time. So we're going to start collecting it on Fridays. And so the next time we collect this will be January 22nd. The reason we're waiting till January 22nd is because we're waiting for students to be back in person. So that will be the Friday after we start hybrid instruction. And so we'll start reporting that quarantine data again to you at that time. And again, we're going to be collecting that on Fridays, snapshots in time, rather than collecting it every day like we were doing. That's just a very challenging thing for our administration, our principals, and the faculty within that school to manage. So that's why we've decided to make the transition to the snapshot on Fridays. Next slide. This slide represents truly gets to kind of the heart of why we asked for you to allow us to move to virtual instruction in the first place. We had the challenges of total number of quarantines and the inability to fill many of our vacant positions because people were unwilling to substitute during that time. So this is a new slide. This is not a slide that you've seen in the past, but it is a reworking of some of the data you have seen in the past. What I did is I took on a monthly basis, these are the total number of absences and vacancies in the district by month, and then the number of those absences that needed to be filled with a substitute, and then the number that filled and the number that went unfilled. And you can see that we really reached our peak of total number of absences in October. But if you look at the green column, you can see that in November through November 14th, we were well over half as many absences when we moved to virtual instruction. And even with moving to virtual instruction midway through November in the orange column still ended with a considerable number of absences and a very high rate of absences that needed to be filled. And so the decision to move to that virtual instruction really helped us to get through that time. Otherwise, I'm not sure what that would have looked like in our schools, frankly. We would have been in a very difficult situation trying to fill those positions. But you can see that in the month of December, the total number of absences did go down. The number needing filled went down. Of course, we were in virtual instruction in that time. One of the things I do want to point out about this slide and the next slide as well is that you kind of need to understand the story behind the data on these two slides, because those the total number of absences and vacancies you can see are it's very high, but the number needing filled is much lower. The reason for that is because obviously not all absences need a sub, but the other big piece of that is that our principals were working with the staff internally within their building to fill those positions without having to go out for a sub. So they were pulling classified staff from their duties to have them cover for a certified teacher in the classroom. And that's why you see the numbers you see here, and that you didn't need all of those absences, did not have to have a sub. If you can imagine, if you will, needing to have 5,069 substitutes in the given month, in the month of November, it would have been a very difficult thing to do. That probably was equating to several hundred substitutes needed in a given day, when we were getting far less than that. Next slide.
Nick, this is President Wagers again. So just so I know, when we're doing that, we don't always have a certified teacher in the class when we're filling those absences. Sometimes we're just, I would call it just getting by. Am I wrong on that, or how does that work?
President Wagers and trustees. So in a typical situation, when we have an absence, the absence goes into our absence management system, and then it is picked up by a certified substitute. So we have two pools of substitutes. We have certified substitutes and classified substitutes. A certified substitute, to be a certified substitute in the district, you have to have a bachelor's degree. It does not have to be in education, but it does have to be a bachelor's degree. And so typically that position would be filled by a certified sub. They have a bachelor's degree. They've also gone through training to substitute in a certified position. In this instance, in this case, and in many cases, when we weren't able to fill those positions with a substitute, we utilized a classified position in the building to fill in for them. So somebody that did not necessarily have a bachelor's degree, did not necessarily go through our substitute training, but they were able to fill in and supervise those students to make sure that they were accounted for and that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing based on the lesson plans provided by the teacher. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Next slide. This slide is a representation of that same data that we were just looking at, but it's the percentage fill rate for those substitutes. And you can see that November through November 14th, we were at a 78% fill rate. The November, for the total month, we ended up at a 69% fill rate. Keep in mind that we typically average around a 93% fill rate in a normal year. And so when you look at this again, September and October would appear to be almost at normal. But again, I remind you that you need to keep the story of the data in mind in this. And we were not putting all of those jobs out there to be filled by a substitute. And so it shows a really high fill rate for September and October, but it's because we were filling a vast majority of those absences through classified employees in the building. The other thing is, keep in mind that we were in virtual instruction for part of that time, and for the secondary students, a majority of that time. And so those all contributed to those high fill rates. So the 92% in September and October can be a little misleading if you don't understand the story behind the data. The 69% fill rate in November, that is part of what drove us to move to that online instruction. We just could not fill the positions that we had. And then the only other thing I'd point out is that in January, that's only one day of data. We had a 96% fill rate today, which is great. I think it was 25 absences and 24 subs picked up jobs. So.
Any other questions before we move on to the next section.
Yep, I think that's my last slide.
Nick, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, so factors we'll be watching closely, and you've seen these before. Of course, number of COVID-19 cases in our schools, as well as, in the community. Spread of COVID-19 in our schools, which we have been very fortunate that our staff has been so diligent with safety protocols and we've not seen very many instances of spread in our schools. The number of students and staff who are quarantined, number of available substitutes, which you just heard about, staff capacity. So do we have enough staff, obviously, with food service and transportation, everything to be able to operate effectively? Effects on learning. So one of the things that was really difficult when we decided to go remote was that we had a lot of families not sending their kids to school at all. Then we had, students that were home one day and teachers trying to figure out how to help the kids that were home on their hybrid day of being home, then the kids in school, but then all these other kids that weren't coming. So the effects on learning with all these students out on quarantine was really a concern of ours. And so we'll watch that closely. And of course, support from Central District Health and the medical professionals. So based on all of this information, what are our next steps? Okay, so the first bullet on this page is obviously one that I think a lot of people are anxious to hear about. I'm going to ask Tamara Fredrickson, our health services supervisor, if she will share some information that we have about the vaccine rollout as it pertains to educators.
Thank you. President Wagers, members of the school board, Deputy Superintendent Roberts, as she's got on the slide there, health services staff, health techs and nurses in the district were part of the phase 1 rollout of the COVID vaccine as according to the state plan. So within the last couple of weeks, they did receive their initial vaccination as part of the COVID series. We know that educators and individuals, staff that work in schools with children and are in schools will be part of phase 2. And as part of our twice a week meetings with Central District Health, we receive vaccine updates on a regular basis. Today, Central District Health reported that they are starting to vaccinate subgroup 1.4, and we're scheduled to be in phase 2 in February. The timeline in February, we do not know because it is dependent on the rate at which the vaccine comes into the state. But we have offered to be a part of that rollout to staff if we can help in any way. We've offered the use of our facilities. We've offered to assist with giving the vaccinations if we need be. At this time, Central District Health does not think that will be necessary because they have enough vaccine providers in the community, clinics and pharmacies that so far individuals, staff and such have been able to go and get their vaccines at those places. So right now we are compiling information about the vaccine for staff so that when vaccine is available, staff will be able to make an educated decision on whether they receive the vaccine or not.
Tamara, thank you. And I have to say that I have my fingers crossed that we do wind up getting to help with giving the vaccine, because nobody gives a better flu shot than Tamara. Honest to goodness, you can't feel it at all. She's amazing. So we're really looking forward to finding out more about the vaccine. We also are going to form a committee that will be co-chaired by District Administration, actually Area Director Becca Anderson, and the Boise Education Association, so Stephanie Myers. The two will co-chair a committee to look at how or when 5-day-a-week in-person learning would be appropriate. So we realize that there's a lot of factors that have to be in play to have students in the building every day, 5 days a week. And so a committee will take that up and give us some recommendations that will then, of course, go to the board reopening subcommittee. And on that committee, we'll have teachers, administrators, health services staff, and parent participants. So just looking to the future and trying to make sure that we're prepared for that when the time is right. And then we're also going to work really hard to strategically shift resources and make more school-specific decisions regarding hybrid schedules versus a fully remote learning schedule. So, when we made the decision after we came back from Thanksgiving break to go district-wide remote, we're hoping in the future we don't have to do that. So perhaps there's a school that hasn't had very many cases. They have very few staff that are quarantined. That school could stay open when maybe down the road a school might have to close for 2 weeks because there have been a lot of cases in the building, or the number of staff quarantined in that building is so large we're having a hard time getting substitutes. We also talked about it might be by level. So if we're having a district-wide substitute issue again, perhaps we could shift substitutes from the high school level down, and high school could go remote for a couple weeks versus the full district. So we're going to try and be very strategic about it so that we don't have to do a full district, remote scenario again. So with that, it's a lot of information. I'm going to pause and see what questions you might have.
I hear
President
Trustee Doan.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Roberts. You had mentioned that forming a committee with the BEA for opening, and I know you're in constant contact with them. Can you explain their position or to the plan right now of going back to hybrid, and if they support or don't support it?
When Trustee Down, President Wagers, Trustee Down, yes, we spoke with Stephanie Myers last Friday and discussed what our plans were. I sent her the PowerPoint today, and she has, she said that they've received the same thing. They have staff, of course, that would like to stay fully remote. They have staff that would like for us to get back into hybrid. I know that, you received a letter from some teachers, and I can give you one example where one of the teachers that wants to stay fully remote works in the same building. We're right down the hall. I know when we announced we were going to go hybrid, that teacher was, go remote, that teacher was devastated because she felt like the hybrid model was working so well. So I think that the BEA, and I don't want to speak for Stephanie, but I think that they're focusing on advocating and helping the teachers as much as they can when there's an area of concern, and also in making sure, that we are being diligent and following all of our safety protocols.
President Wagers.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Deputy Superintendent Roberts, do you have a sense of once the vaccines are available for our teachers, do you have a sense of how many of our teachers will choose to take that vaccination or not? And if teachers choose not to take the vaccine, what is the plan for that?
President Wagers, Trustee Oppenheimer, that was one thing we have been discussing, is that we will need to do and survey our staff to see who's interested in getting the vaccine, because that will affect, we'll have to get that information to Central District Health while they plan and try and figure out the providers that we'll go to for the vaccinations. So right now we don't have that information yet of who wants it and who does not plan to take the vaccine. We do not believe we can require the vaccine. So what the great news is that when we talked to the hospitals, they told us that they anticipated a much lower rate of participants from their staff at the hospitals getting the vaccine than what they've experienced. So we hope that our staff will agree to the vaccine. We're going to send out a video that St. Luke's did produce with facts and information on the vaccine, but we have not worked all the way through what we will do if somebody does not choose to get vaccinated.
Any other questions, comments by trustees?
President Wagers.
Superintendent Dennis.
Tamara, could you talk a little bit about the differences between the vaccines that we currently have available to us and then the time frame between the first and second dosage? Could you visit with the board a little bit about that and the time frame overall for you being considered immunized from COVID?
Sure. President Wagers, trustees, Superintendent Dennis, currently there are 2 vaccines approved by the FDA. The Pfizer, both vaccines require a booster. The Pfizer vaccine requires 21 days between the initial vaccination and the booster, and the Moderna vaccine, which is most likely what we will get because it doesn't require the cold chain storage. There's a 28-day period that has to occur before you get the booster. Once a person receives a booster, then there's another 2 weeks before you really are considered fully protected with the vaccine.
A follow-up.
Go ahead.
So given that, Tamara, I just want to make sure my math is right. Even if we were to start vaccination in our schools in, say, the beginning of February, it would take at least until the middle of March before a person would be fully immunized. And then given the fact that we have over 5,000 employees in our district, the time frame to immunize our staff it's a significant undertaking. Is my math right?
President Wagers, trustees, Superintendent Dennis, you are exactly right. That would be probably best case scenario, given the fact that Central District Health at this time doesn't even know how much vaccine and the timeline they're going to get it in. So if we were able to start vaccinating the beginning of February, that would be best case scenario.
President Wagers.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. I don't know if this is for Deputy Superintendent Roberts or for Superintendent Dennis. So at the end of the day, are you saying that we will begin our hybrid model on January 19th? We will do that until the vaccines are available for our teachers and they can get vaccinated. Are we looking at entertaining at all the idea of going back 5 days a week prior to our teachers being fully vaccinated? Or are we just waiting on numbers to fall? Like, help us understand a little bit what the thought process is behind, what's the next phase of getting our kids back into school, whether it's our K through 2, our K through 6, or secondary.
President Wagers. Sure, President Wagers, Trustee Oppenheimer. A really good question. I think the short answer to your question is we anticipate that we will be in a hybrid model for at least the next month until vaccination is starting to get into the arms of our employees. I think that's one of the reasons why Deputy Superintendent Roberts mentioned the committee that we need to put together to really start looking at what are those milestones, what are those metrics that we can start using to start discussing whether it is K-12 or tiers of our system that can start back in 4 or 5 days a week. I think it's really important that the public understand that we understand the value in full-time education for our kids, and we are thrilled that we're having conversations around that with the vaccine rather than where we have been over the last couple of months. So I don't have a specific answer as to when, but I think that's part of the challenge and the responsibility of this committee that we would like to put together that would make some recommendations back to the administration, which then would go to the board reopening committee and then lastly to the Board of Trustees. That's about the best I can do to answer your question at this stage.
Follow up, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Superintendent Dennis. And not to put you on the spot, but when we chose in November to go all virtual, it was an operational decision. And here we are, we're kind of, we're into the second semester, and we don't really know what that operational situation is at this point. Is that going to have precedence over the safety or the not having, not participating in the spread, or is the spread now sort of impacting the operational point. Can you help us understand that a little bit? Because when we did close, it was for operational purposes, as opposed to, we know that there was not spread within our school. So if you could talk to that, that would be helpful.
President Wagers, Trustee Oppenheimer, you're exactly right. The operational issue became unwieldy for us within the school system to truly have a educational experience. We could have continued to operate within our district if we wanted to put 4 and 5 classrooms into a gym and not have a classroom teacher for some of those kids. So the educational experience for those kids played a role in that. As we've moved forward, we've been able to reset over the last month and a half and get ourselves back into a position where we are fully confident that our safety protocols are going to continue to keep the spread within the schools to a minimum. And I think we have to remember that the goal of this has never been to eliminate COVID in our classrooms, but to mitigate the risk associated with that. So I think that the spread within the community is going to be a factor, as well as our operational abilities as we move forward. I don't know which one would take precedent over the other, but safety is always going to be our #1 priority as we evaluate how we go down this road in the second semester. Does that help?
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the current reopening plan?
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
So, so after hearing from Deputy Superintendent Roberts and our nursing supervisor, Tamara Fredrickson, sorry, with the S, I think it's, I think what we need to note is that we are continuing with the reopening plan that was in place when we last met before a holiday, which was to open virtually this week and to move to hybrid next week. But now, and we hear from the superintendent that we'll probably be in that hybrid model for at least a month as we monitor the situation with vaccines, with operational structure, and with the COVID numbers. And, you know, in terms of the feedback that we're getting from our community, once again, it is very, very even. We got less feedback this time. We didn't get 250 emails, but we got about 30. And those were still some in favor of virtual until everyone is vaccinated, some in favor of going back 5 days a week starting tomorrow, others supportive of hybrid. So I hope that the public can grasp the complexity of the picture that we're looking at, because we really are balancing safety primarily with what we know is good educational model delivery for students. And then we have to have an organizational structure that will support whatever we do. So I personally am just really supportive of the administration's plan to proceed with the reopening plan as it has been in place for the past month, et cetera, and monitor as we go, because it takes us a step closer to getting kids in front of teachers and a step closer to 5 days a week. And we can move in that direction if we find the signals are all right to do that. In the meantime, it weighs on the side of safety for our students as we monitor how the reopening in a hybrid model will work. So I just wanted to give that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory. I do have just a few comments. I talked to a good friend of mine who's a pediatrician, and I think it's the American Academy of Pediatricians came out with a new report, I think it was last week, and they are really pushing to get kids back into school. And, you know, even to the extent like, okay, so we want you to have 6 feet, but it's more important, let's go to 3 feet and get kids back in school versus not having kids back in school. But it's that delicate balance piece you're talking about, Trustee Gregory. It's like, how do you balance safety versus education? We know the best place for kids, you know, given if we had a perfect world, we'd put them in front of a teacher every time. I mean, that's what we want to do, but we also have to keep our students safe and our teachers safe. And I'd like to acknowledge, you know, their concerns too. I mean, they are on the front lines, and we as a board are putting them there. And that's a hard thing to do, but we know how important that is to our community. And that's at least Dave's opinion anyway, strictly is, we need to have those kids, and that's, you know, some of the mental health of our kids, but also our families as well. You know, those kids need to go to school, and the parents, it's the best place for them. And to that, it requires a little bit of sacrifice or of safety on our teachers' part, a mitigation of risk. We're all accepting risk every day throughout this pandemic. And, you know, I choose to go to work every day, and I have to do that to make my business run. And I'm at a school board meeting physically in a building at the school district. And that's, you know, that there's some acceptance of risk that goes along with that. And we're asking the teachers to accept a little risk too, but it's also for the good of the community. Once again, this is just in Dave's opinion. So that's what I got. Any other comments on the reopening plan? Okay, hearing no comments, this was not an action item, so this was just an update from the administration. This is something we will continue to revisit, not just monthly, but weekly. And we are looking at this, you know, as a board. If we need to have a special board meeting, we'll have a special board meeting. We'll do it. It's not a, you know, that's an easy thing for us to do, but we will keep our eye on this as we go through this. Moving on to the next agenda item, update on athletics and on how that is going. We will have an action item associated with that.
President Wagers, just quickly, I will kind of give you an update. I think we provided you guys the data associated with what we've seen since we began our athletic program back on December 15th, where we had some limited workouts. Spent a week in doing that, and then followed it up with the beginning of formal practices on December 22nd. Dave, I think I'm getting some feedback.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right. So once we began formal practices, that took place over the winter holiday break. We've seen the number of cases. What I've come to understand through the contact tracing is that we are unaware of any spread within our athletic community. All of the cases that we have reported to you as far as the contact tracing has been put those contacts outside of the athletic program and outside of our school district. Those came from the community at large. So that's a good thing. One of the things that I want to reiterate was one of the things that Director Smith talked about, and that was I really would like to compliment our coaches and our athletic directors and principals on how they have implemented our athletic program over the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've got some examples of even of our coaches even going above and beyond and being ultra conservative in their approach to this to make sure that their kids get an opportunity to participate through the course of the season. I know that we had a coach and the team make a decision as a team to quarantine themselves, even though it probably was not a necessary act, but they really wanted to make sure that there was no spread within their team so that they got an opportunity for those kids to play the rest of the season. So I really just publicly really want to thank our coaches, our athletic directors, and our principals for how seriously they have taken this opportunity that they've had to get to an opportunity to play. So Other than that, you guys have received the information of the governor's agreement to allow fans to attend our athletic events. The SIC met on that last week and came to an agreement that we were going to allow 2 fans per participant of the home team to attend our that home game, which really amounts to a couple of parents per player in our gyms, which in a basketball situation is probably between 25 and 30 fans in gyms that hold 1,200 or more, which will allow us to physically space at least 12 feet apart between family pods and allow those parents to see their kids play live and in person, which we agreed to be a part of with the SIC. With that being said, I don't know that I have much else to report, but I'm happy to stand for any questions the board might have.
Any questions for Superintendent Dennis on the sports?
President Wagers. President Wagers.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Thank you. Superintendent Dennis, we have received a few emails from parents saying that why is it okay that we are allowing extracurricular activities versus having our kids in school? If you could talk to us a little bit about sort of the why and the differences between hosting athletics, extracurricular activities versus having in-person learning, that would be great. Thank you.
President Wagers, Trustee Oppenheimer, let me start with this, and that is that the goal here is to have both taking place, and which is what we're going to be doing starting on Monday, or I guess Tuesday after Martin Luther King Day. So the good news is we're going to be able to do both. We're going to be able to have some in-person learning as well as our athletics. The other issue that I think it plays into this is there's a big difference between us being able to monitor and work with logistically 500 and some odd total participants in athletics compared to 2,500 or 25,000, excuse me, students and 4,000 and so staff. So it's a matter of scale much more than anything else. And we want to provide as many opportunities for our kids that we can do safely as we move forward. So although it may seem to people that this seems like a contradiction to what we've been doing, our goal has always been to try and provide as much opportunity as we can for our kids. So being able to have our athletic program going with 500 total participants, we feel like we can do that safely. Now that we see the numbers and we've got the go ahead from the medical community, we think we can move forward with our in-person learning as well. And that is good news on both accounts.
Any other questions or comments from trustees?
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory.
I believe this is an action item. Would a motion be in order at this time?
Yes, this is an action item. It's going to be based on the high school athletic plan for the governor's orders on gathering and spectators. Basically, what we've been asked to do is have the board chairman and the superintendent sign that plan. So for me to sign something like this, I would like board approval because it shouldn't just be me doing that alone. So that would be the motion I would like to entertain.
President Gregory, I'd like to move that we authorize the superintendent and board chair to sign the assurance document to the governor's office associated with his athletic attendance plan. Attached to our assurance document will be our intent to comply with the SIC plan, which is more stringent than the governor's plan. And that's my motion.
Second.
Second from Trustee Greeley. Any discussion on the governor's plan or the signing of that?
President Wagers.
Trustee Oppenheimer.
Can you please state what that plan actually is?
I can. So basically the objective of the plan is to allow districts to participate in athletics and have spectators in the gym. So, and they did this this is somewhat in reaction to, we had a problem around the state where some districts were allowing full spectator participation. So they would get 1,000 people in a gym. And this was in December. And so we were having some pushback on that. So we asked the governor to come up with a plan so that didn't happen anymore. The great part is the SIC has agreed to this, both 4A and 5A, which means the Bishop Kellys and the Emmets have also agreed to this, the SIC plan. And this, the SIC plan is more stringent than the governor's plan. Is that a true statement? Okay, yes, just making sure
Yes.
making sure I'm right on that. So a lot of this is to provide support to the governor for what he's doing to help school districts, limit the number of fans, because we were having numerous districts and schools that were choosing not to follow that recommendation. So basically the responsibilities will adhere to all aspects of this Idaho Rebound Stage 2 protocol. We'll have a protocol plan in place for all areas of our facilities, including parking lots, sidewalks, lobbies, bathrooms, hallways, and the gym. Entry and exit will need to be clearly marked, and if possible, separate entry and exit for each group of participants and spectators. So if we have, for instance, a sophomore game, a JV game, and a varsity game, those will all have to happen in succession. We'll have to have more time. We'll have to clean in between those. The whole group will need to leave, and the next group will come in. And we have those plans in place. Our athletic directors have set that up for each facility. The district will be responsible to uphold these protocols during athletic events in their home gymnasiums. So, we have to make sure that's happening in our gyms, and we expect the teams that we're playing to happen in theirs. For non-compliance, only a coach, athletic director, or administrator for a team competing in the event may file a complaint for non-compliance. So if we go into another gym and we feel like it's non-compliant, that we can file a complaint against that team or district, but only the coach, athletic director, and administrator can do that. Consequences of non-compliance: first offense, the school would receive a written reprimand from the State Board of Education. Second offense, the school that is found non-compliant, they'll forfeit the event. And then third and final events, if they continue to be non-compliant, they'll forfeit all future athletic events for the winter season. Schools that choose not to participate in an athletic event at a school has been found non-compliant will not forfeit the athletic event. So if they choose not to, if they feel like it's not a safe environment, it does not count as a forfeit. It won't count against their record. And that's basically what the order is. And so the authorization is just us signing on to that protocol.
President Wagers?
Yes.
Sorry. So just to be clear, we're voting on a motion that would allow two participants per athlete, correct? At our home games.
Actually, no. Well, and that's actually what we're voting on, is me to sign the governor's order. And what our district policy is going to be tighter than that, but because they're not necessarily saying two people per. That's an SIC ruling, and we're not voting on the SIC ruling.
Okay.
We're voting on the ability to sign the governor's order, because that requires a signature, where the administration can set our procedures, because this is not a policy, it's a procedure. The administration can set the procedure, but we're setting, since this is a signed deal for the governor, we're basically saying we're following the athletic plan set in the Idaho Stage 2 protocol.
Okay, so we're voting on you and Superintendent Dennis to be able to sign the governor's order for participants at games. But then on top of that, the Boise School District, in partnership with the SIC, will have more stringent protocols that will allow for 2 participants per athlete. Or does that include cheerleaders? Like, does the cheerleaders' parents get to go? what I guess I just kind of want to know a little bit more about like the details of
Absolutely. And I'm going to let
Sorry.
Superintendent Dennis fill you in on that because he was involved in those SIC meetings. So one moment.
President Wagers, Trustee Oppenheimer, the short answer to your question is yes. Any participant, which would include cheerleaders, if the dance team is performing, those kinds, anybody who is a participant in the event would be allowed to bring two, I want to say parents, but they get basically 2 tickets to the home game. And they would be allowed to spread out within our gyms and watch those performances, the cheerleaders or the game themselves, and only at home games. The governor's order allows for home and away fans to attend any athletic event. In this case, the SIC has restricted that to only home fans so that we can get a sense as a conference as to what our challenges are. That will allow, with the goal being that at least by the district tournament time, we will be allowing both fan away and home fans into those district tournament games. That's the intent of the agreement by the SIC.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions?
President Wagers.
Trustee Gregory?
And in thinking through the difference between the governor's plan and the SIC plan, I see a lot of wisdom in only allowing home participants initially, mostly because we're pretty tight knit. We're a closer knit population than some of rural parts of Idaho, and we are a hotspot. And so rather than have increased opportunity to share between neighboring counties, et cetera, and so forth, and fuel that hotspot, we are ruling on the side of caution by keeping everybody at home to hopefully get a handle on a prediction for how it would be when we go to district competition. So I see that as a pretty good plan, and I'm happy to support something that's a little bit more stringent than the governor's, who was came up with a plan that addresses statewide, both rural and urban counties.
Thank you, Trustee Gregory. Any other discussion on the motion?
President Wagers, just one more comment, if I may. Just a reminder, in the fall, the Boise School District allowed for 2 guests to attend their child's or whoever athletic. And I know this because my daughter played 8th grade volleyball at East, and we were given 2 tickets for every game, and it was very well monitored. They checked those tickets at the door. Everyone wore masks. They were very good about that. Parents were very good about social distancing or physical distancing within the bleachers. And the first time that I walked into that, I didn't really know what to expect. But once I went in there, I will say that I felt very comfortable with the protocols that the Boise School District put in place with checking the tickets, the masks, hand sanitizer at the front door. Parents were really good about physical distancing. So I thought that was really good. So just a reminder, this isn't the first time that we're doing this. We did this in the fall with fall sports as well. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Trustee Oppenheimer. Any other discussion on the plan? Okay, let's go and we'll do a vote on that plan, on the motion then. So all in favor of signing the high school athletic plan for governor's order on gatherings and spectators, vote aye.
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 Are there any opposed? So that will be unanimous vote recorded.